World War I, also known as the Great War, was a pivotal era that changed the course of humanity from July 28, 1914 to November 11, 1918. The result of such a bloody war, in which 9 million combatants and 7 million civilians lost their lives, was a spark of technological and industrial feats, especially in transportation and weaponry, as well as the implementation of new ideas and systems still observed today. The war was primarily caused by four central ideas that can be described in the acronym M.A.I.N, or M.A.I.N. The first of which is militarism, as the war can be viewed as an arms race between Britain, France, and Germany. All of the world's major powers, other than the United States and Great Britain, had increased their military size to more than double what they were from 1870 to 1914. A spark of alliances can also be viewed as a cause of World War I. Alliances were initially formed to promote peace and protection, but they backfired. When two countries disputed, they would have the power to draw the nations they formed alliances with into a fight. The conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia was the cause of World War I due to the allies of each nation getting involved. Imperialism, a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force, is another key factor, as this idea led to a global competition to conquer as many colonies and as much land as possible. Lastly, there was nationalism. The belief that one's own nation or culture is superior to others fueled the competition to build the strongest nations possible. There were many countries involved in the First World War. The Allied powers include France, Russia, Serbia, Japan, Belgium, Montenegro, Italy, Portugal, Romania, Hejaz, the United States, Greece, Siam, and the British Empire. These nations fought against the Central Powers, which consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. Of the many events that were recorded from World War I, some key events could not be overlooked. On June 23, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist. This assassination set the war in motion as it triggered a diplomatic crisis which led to the mobilization of forces that led to the beginning of the war. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, beginning the First World War. On August 4, 1914, Germany declared war on Belgium. After doing so, the German army, led by Karl von Bülow and Alexander von Kluck, invaded Belgium. The invasion, which resulted in a German victory against the Belgian and French military, cost Germany the lives of 20,000 combatants and Belgium and France the lives of 30,000 combatants, along with 6,000 civilians. On August 23, 1914, Germans led by Paul von Hindenburg defeated the Russian army led by Alexander Samsonov at the Battle of Tannenberg near Allenstein, East Prussia. On the German side, roughly 14,000 combatants were either wounded, missing, or killed in action, while the Russian army took a heavy loss with roughly 170,000 combatants either wounded, missing, or killed in action. On September 12, 1914, the armies of France and the United Kingdom stopped the German invasion of Paris at the Marne River in the First Battle of the Marne. The French army, led by Marshal of France Joseph Joffre, suffered 263,000 casualties in their army of over 1,071,000 men, while German forces, led by General Helmuth von Moltke, suffered 256,000 casualties. On April 25, 1915, the Ottoman Empire was victorious against British and French forces at the Gallipoli Peninsula during the Gallipoli Campaign. British and French forces, led by Generals Ian Hamilton of Britain and Henry Gourard of France, lost 250,000 of their 568,000 men during the campaign, while the Ottoman Empire lost 218,000 to 251,000 of their 315,000 men. On May 7, 1915, the Lusitania, a British passenger ship, was torpedoed by a German U-boat, playing a significant role in turning the public opinion against Germany in the war. On February 21, 1916, the French army, led again by Marshal of France Joseph Joffre, held their line against German forces led by General Erich von Falkenhayn at the Battle of Verdun, the longest battle of the war, in Verdun, France. The French army suffered 315,000 to 542,000 casualties, and the German army suffered 281,000 to 434,000 casualties in the 10-month battle that resulted in a French victory. On May 31, 1916, German and British fleets attacked one another in the North Sea at the Battle of Jutland, a naval battle that had no clear winner, even though each side suffered thousands of casualties and lost many precious naval ships, including battlecruisers, armored cruisers, destroyers, pre-dreadnoughts, light cruisers, and torpedo boats. On June 4, 1916, Russian forces led by General Alexei Brusilov claimed a victory against the armies from Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire at the Kingdom of Galicia and Lodomeria in what became known as the Brusilov Offensive. The offensive, while being considered Russia's greatest feat during World War I, was also among the most lethal offensives in history, tallying the casualty count to over 1 million men on each side. On July 1st, 1916, the Battle of the Somme was held at the Somme River between the Allied forces and the opposing German military. The battle resulted in 420,000 British casualties, 200,000 French casualties, and 434 to 500,000 German casualties, and had no conclusive victor. On July 28, 1917, the War Industries Board of the United States was formed. This led to a mass production of supplies for use on the battlefield in World War I, giving the Americans even more of an already established advantage. On July 31, 1917, the Third Battle of Ypres was held between Germany and the combined forces of Britain, France, and Belgium at the Flanders region of Belgium. The Allies were able to claim victory in the battle, suffering 200,000 to 448,000 casualties compared to Germany's 217,000 to 410,000. On April 2, 1917, the United States entered the efforts of the Allies by declaring war on the Central Powers. Under the command of General John C. Pershing, over 2 million soldiers fought alongside the Allied powers. On November 10, 1917, Russia set up a communist government and withdrew from the war by attempting to make peace with the Central Powers. After signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, a treaty which forced Russia to give up Finland, Poland, and the Baltic states in which the nation occupied, Russia broke into civil war which gave birth to the Red Army. On March 21, 1918, the German army attacked the Allied powers at northern France in what became known as the German Spring Offensive of 1918. Germany, opposing Britain, France, the United States, Italy, Portugal, and Siam, held their ground due to the support of General Erich Ludendorff for as long as they could, but the victor of the battle proved to be inconclusive as each side was pushed back too far to declare victory. Germany lost 688,340 men, while the opposition lost a combined total of over 850,000. On April 1, 1918, the Royal Air Force was formed after the Royal Flying Corps of the British Army merged with the Royal Naval Air Service to defend the skies over Britain. On July 16, 1918, the countries of France, the United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Siam defeated German forces at the Marne River during the Second Battle of the Marne. The Allies suffered over 132,000 casualties, while Germany suffered almost 169,000. This was an important victory for the Allies as it marked the end of the series of German victories and begun a series of Allied victories that would last until the end of the war. On August 8, 1918, east of Picardy, France, the Battle of Amiens was held between the combined forces of Britain, France, and the United States and the German Empire. One of the least costly battles of the war, which resulted in a decisive Allied victory, had the Allies only lose 44,000 men compared to Germany's 75,000 casualties. On September 19, 1918, the combined forces of Britain, France, and the Kingdom of Hejaz against Germany and the Ottoman Empire led to an Allied victory at the Battle of Megiddo and Tel Megiddo. The Allies suffered only a little over 5,000 casualties in this battle, which cannot even be compared to the loss of 26,000 of the 32,000 combatants from Germany and the Ottoman Empire. On September 23, 1918, the U.S. Army, led by General Pershing, alongside the French Army, was victorious against Germany at the Battle of St. Mihiel. Roughly 7,000 men on the Allied side were either killed or wounded, while roughly 22,500 men from the German Army were either killed in action, wounded in action, or became prisoners of war. On November 3, 1918, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire surrendered to the Allies by signing an armistice with Italy that was put in effect by November 4th. On November 9, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany is overthrown, and a German Republic was born. And finally, on November 11, 1918, at 6 a.m. in the morning, Germany signed the Armistice of Compiègne, thus ending World War I. After the war was over, however, the influenza pandemic arrived, killing more through disease than the war did through gunfire, infecting nearly 20% of the world's population and ultimately killing between 50 million and 100 million people. Other than the deaths tallying from the influenza pandemic, statistics showed the true horror of the outcome of World War I. There were over 38 million casualties in the war, 18 million had perished, and 20 million men were wounded. Of the 18 million that lost their lives, 7 million were civilians. 2 million men volunteered to participate in the war efforts, and 2.8 million men had been drafted. Throughout the battles mentioned, many technological advancements and innovations in weaponry were put into place. Tanks were first seen in World War I, initially referred to as armored land ships, and changed the battlefield for decades to come. Automatic weapons were being used for the first time on the battlefield, rather than semi-automatic or bolt-action weapons that would take too long to fire or reload. Poisonous gas gave birth to chemical warfare, and mustard gas was used to wipe out forces until the development of gas masks, which diminished the effectiveness of poison gases entirely. There were also many advancements in medicine. Kotex sanitary pads were first used in the field by medics to prevent infections. Portable x-rays were implemented into the battlefield to provide for a quick diagnosis for injury, allowing a medic to properly care for a wound, resulting in saving lives. Sun lamps were used on wounded soldiers to promote healing by increasing vitamin D in the body. Shortly after the war ended, radio technology advanced to form air traffic control, which is still used today to guide aircraft at airports and military bases. There are also some lasting legacies of World War I still observed today. The Espionage and Sedition Acts were put into effect in order to regulate the negative expression of the government or war efforts in a negative light, and also to regulate one's ability to interfere with the sale of war bonds. Trench warfare, primarily used by the Western Front in World War I to protect from the gunfire of no man's land, lasted for decades after the war, but proved to be incredibly unsanitary. Shell shock and PTSD are some of the worst legacies of the war. Victims of these disorders suffer from trauma that sparked from extensive time on the battlefield. Conscription, as well as the formation of the draft, allowed for civilians to work in the military to protect their country. Many started to observe the idea of pacifism, the belief that violence is unjustifiable and disputes should be resolved peacefully. Socialism was also observed after the war. It is a political and economic theory that advocated that the means of production, exchange, and distribution should be regulated by the community rather than the government. Propaganda, biased or misleading information used to publicize a specific point of view, was abused during the war, but now it is used even more today than it was in World War I. Huge breakthroughs in blood banking during the war, such as how to prevent blood clots, allowed for establishment of a blood donor service in London in 1922. 6 million African Americans from the rural southern United States started to migrate to the Northeast, Midwest, and West until 1960 in what became known as the Great Migration.